She is an illegitimate president. I, for one, do not recognize the person who was inaugurated as the president.
Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan says she wants dialogue. But just as the president stretches out a hand, former Botswana President Ian Khama cuts through the noise, declaring he doesn't recognize her presidency. His reason? A flawed election marred by ballot-stuffing, repression, and systematic manipulation. Even the African Union and SADC have quietly admitted the polls fell short of democratic standards. So, is Suluhu reaching out or simply reaching for legitimacy?
In order to stay in power, will rig an election as if they are God's gift to their country. When you have a country with millions of people, for any leader to think they are the only ones who can be presidents is pathetic.
This is not just a Tanzanian story, it is a test for African democracy. As Samia Suluhu calls for reconciliation, the world is questioning whether her house is already on fire. Let's break down what is happening, who is challenging her rule, and why this moment could redefine East Africa's political balance. In a carefully worded address on November 10th, President Suluhu called on opposition parties to set aside past grievances and join her for a new national dialogue. Her tone was calm, her message unity, but behind the optics, the cracks are widening. This gesture comes after weeks of unrest, international pressure, and whispers of diplomatic isolation. Analysts say Suluhu's olive branch isn't about inclusion, it is about survival. Then came the bombshell.
The recent election and what transpired, the killings around that election, I, for one, do not recognize the person who was inaugurated as the president. It is totally unacceptable when an African leader, in order to stay in power, will resort to killing his or her own people.
Former Botswana President Ian Khama publicly announced he does not recognize Suluhu's presidency, accusing her government of presiding over a sham election. Khama cited ballot-stuffing, repression, and systematic flaws that made the process fundamentally undemocratic. He is not alone. Both the African Union and SADC have quietly flagged irregularities, confirming that Tanzania's polls did not meet accepted democratic norms. This statement was more than symbolic, it was seismic. Rarely does an African statesman openly disown another leader's legitimacy. Khama's move amplifies what many Tanzanians already whisper, that the 2025 elections were a managed performance, not a mandate.
We first of all must give voice to victims. We must allow them to say what has happened to them. And what they are saying has happened to them is that they've been shot, they've been injured, they've been killed, they've been violated. From even just the footage that we've watched here, you can see that the sites where many of them were injured looked to me, for those of you who are little familiar with Tanzania, they look like very domestic situations.
Suluhu's government insists it won fairly, but the evidence paints a different picture. Blocked observers, tampered counts, opposition arrest, and systematic repression. The ruling CCM party maintained its dominance in a landslide too suspicious to inspire confidence. And now, as the opposition fights for air, Suluhu is calling for dialogue. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Chadema's Tundu Lissu remains at the heart of the storm, facing treason charges for questioning the election's credibility. Lissu has become both a symbol and a target. He says he's willing to talk, but not under intimidation. For years, Tanzania's opposition has been invited to dialogue, only to find themselves silenced afterward. Suluhu's move, critics say, mirrors her predecessor's playbook: promise, reform, consolidate power, repeat.
But the sad story does not stop there. The sad story does not stop there. Recently, we saw another inauguration of a 90-something-year-old president in Cameroon. 90-something years old, who can hardly walk. but still wants to be president. We have seen in countries like Ivory Coast, and they're not the only ones, where when an opposition leader shows that they are going to be able to put up a credible challenge against an incumbent, suddenly they are charged.
When Samia Suluhu took office, she was praised as a reformer. She reopened civic space, freed journalists, and lifted bans on rallies. But by 2025, the mask had slipped. Arrests returned, rallies were disrupted, and critics vanished from the public square. Now, her dialogue often looks less like reconciliation and more like damage control, a tactic to ease international pressure while maintaining a firm grip at home. Khama's defense has turned Tanzania's domestic issue into a regional headache. The African Union and SADC are now under scrutiny for their silence. How long can they stay quiet as one of their member states drifts further from democratic norms? The ripple effects are being felt across East Africa, especially in Nairobi, Kampala, and Kigali, where leaders are watching closely, each calculating what Tanzania's unrest means for their own regimes.
Lazima tuje na solutions actually. Haiwezekani mtu mmoja amekaa nje ya Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania, dada tu, hata ukimwangalia pia rais yake anawaambia watu wakafanya hivyo na wanaenda kufanya kweli, alafu imetokea anaanza kutamba. Anasema bado nitakuja kivingine. Lazima tumkamate.
With some crime or the other. Their parties are banned for one reason or the other, just so that an incumbent can remain in power. That is not the Africa that we want.
Samia Suluhu's dialogue call could be a genuine attempt to stabilize a divided nation or a desperate bid to save face. But the bigger question remains, can dialogue exist in an environment where dissent equals treason? For now, Tanzania's democracy hangs in the balance, caught between a leader fighting to hold on, an opposition fighting to survive, and a continent watching in silence. In the end, this isn't just about Tanzania, it is about the integrity of democracy itself in Africa's next generation.
Hatuna budi kuhakikisha tunahimizana umoja na upendo kwa nchi yetu. Tunadumisha amani na kuheshimu sheria za nchi. Kinyume cha hayo, maandamano, vurugu, uvunjifu wa amani husababisha maumivu na havileti manufaa wala faida kwa yoyote yule. Ni wasihi wa Tanzania, tuchague hekima badala ya ghadhabu, busara badala ya mihemuko, upendo badala ya chuki, uvumilivu badala ya vinyongo, umoja badala ya mgawanyiko.
For Maisha TV, I'm William Juma.